Today we're going to talk about hatching. It's a type of line quality that you can use in your drawings, and I actually really like it. It kind of gives you an old-timey look. It might remind you of old prints or old book etchings that you might have seen, because it is a type of line quality that you would use in printmaking, and that's been around for hundreds of years. So let's take a look at some examples and we'll actually define what hatching really is. So hatching is really to shade an area with parallel lines that are close together. And you can see here that these have parallel lines that are close together. However, instead of just being grouped together like shading is, there's a little bit of space in between them so that you can really see the individual lines. Here I've got an example that I did with an 8B Mitsubishi Hi-Uni pencil. And then I also did an example here with Caran d'Ache luminance colored pencils. And you can see that you can layer different colors of pencils together, or you can layer different pressures together in order to create this look. Let's look at a couple of other examples, and then we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of hatching. So here's another example. This one was done with pastel. I actually did this one myself. And so with the pastels, they blend a little bit more together, and you can still see the individual lines, sort of give it a different blurry character. And yet you're seeing those marks so that it really looks hand-drawn, and I think that's part of the appeal. So let's look at some other artists. One is going to be a very famous artist, Leonardo da Vinci. And in this image, it's a drawing of a woman, and you can see that he really just took the diagonal lines and used that to shade the face. There's another contemporary artist that I've been following on Instagram, and he also has a YouTube channel, and I really love his work. His name is Fu, and his drawings, you can find the links here. You can see that here's a process drawing where you can really see the different hatch marks. And then as he layers, the image starts to come into focus a little bit more, but you can still see those individual hatch marks, and I think that's part of the beautiful quality of his work. So hopefully you'll check his stuff out too, because I really love that artwork. Okay, so let's look at the apples again, and we'll talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of using hatching. So the great thing about hatching is that you can do this with so many different art materials. You can use pencil, charcoal, pen and ink, colored pencils, pastels. You could even probably try to do this with some different paint material. It's also really easy to cover up mistakes because all you have to do is layer some more lines. So it's really nice because it's kind of loose and fun, and it doesn't take as steady of a hand. So maybe if you're somebody who has a little bit of arthritis or a tremor, or maybe you feel like you're new at drawing and you don't have as much control over your hands to begin with, then this is something that doesn't take such a steady hand. It might be a great way for you to start to experiment. The other thing that's really nice is that it's really easy to blend colored pencils or pastels with hatching. Like you can see here that I switched back and forth between several different colors of red, and the layering of each individual stroke of your hatching kind of helps it to blend a little bit more easily. I think those are probably my favorite things about it. So let's talk a little bit about the difficulties with hatching. One is that you can see that I use these diagonal lines, and my apple actually is curving from side to side this way and from top to bottom this way. So it's like a round ball. It's curving away from you in all directions at once. And when I use these diagonal lines here, it actually kind of flattens the shape of the surface out and the planes out. So you really have to layer in order to create any sense of volume with hatching. And so that can be a difficult thing to learn to do. Another thing that's quite difficult is that if I'm using an F or a B pencil, my lead will stay sharp for longer But if I switch to a softer pencil like a 3B or a 5B, that lead is going to get ground down so quickly that all of a sudden my individual strokes are going to blend together. And so you won't see those individual strokes quite as clearly and precisely as if you're using a harder pencil. So if I'm using a softer pencil, what I find is that I have to sharpen my pencil so quickly and so frequently that I actually eat through a pencil much more quickly. Another thing that can be a little bit different, I'm going to actually show you an example here, is that the normal natural motion of your hand, if you rest your hand on the side and start to do a larger hatching stroke, you can see that the natural motion of your hand is actually a curve, and that's because there's this pivot point on your wrist. The same would be true if you're moving from your shoulder, because your arm is connected to your shoulder, so that becomes the pivot point, and you would actually have curved lines if you're doing a large line. So you need to watch out if you're intending to do a curve or if you're wanting it to be straight, then you're gonna have to use your hand and your arm a little bit differently and be mindful of your body so that you get a straight line. I think another challenge, and maybe this one is probably the best one to show as an example, sometimes with hatching, you can almost get something that looks blurry or even a little bit furry. It can look like there's some motion to it or there's a fuzz to it. And so if that isn't important in the meaning of your drawing, then that can actually be detrimental. It can sort of take away from the point of your drawing. So you have to be careful about when you use hatching. And I think the last thing that's a little bit difficult is that if you're covering a large area with something like graphite, it takes a really long time to use hatching to cover that large area. And then opposite of that, if you're using something like a pastel or a charcoal to cover a very small area, like right in here, it's easy for that to get a little bit out of control with the hatching marks that you might try to make. So you need to scale your material to the size of the image that you're going to work with. So that's everything you need to know about hatching. I hope you guys attempt to do some different drawings with hatching and let me know how it goes. Go ahead and ping me down below if you have any questions, and I hope this helps you out. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, LZM Studio, where I frequently release quick tips and all kinds of different ideas about drawing. Also check out my Facebook and my Instagram page. I like to show photographs of my artwork, of my students' artwork, and share funny stories from my students on those pages. And then check out my website, lzmstudio.com, where you're going to find more inspiration and full-length, detailed tutorials.